Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. For the record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
For the record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today is Wednesday, the 2nd day of May 2018. I trust that everyone had a very good evening. First of all, I'd like to extend our condolences to the family of the late Mr. Kirkland Nixon. We've seen tributes extended to him and his family, or we have seen tributes about him as well. We have seen the government flags on government buildings flying at half-staff as well. All a tribute to a great Caymanian who dedicated his life to public service, and we will all miss him tremendously. And I'm sure that the government, the fire service, people of the Cayman Islands will give him a great send-off, as well. I also want to send out belated happy birthday greetings. I believe that I received this email late on Monday, so I was not able to make the announcement, but Mr. CB, Mr. Clifton Borden celebrated his 95th birthday on the 29th of April as well. So we want to wish CB a belated happy birthday as well. A man with a lot of knowledge about the Cayman Islands as well, and I would encourage you when you get an opportunity to go and to talk with him to gain some of that wealth of knowledge that he has in relation to the Cayman Islands as well. So I want to thank you, our listening and our viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and, by extension, For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles, as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. For the Record is a show produced by the staff and the management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. Normally it is that beautiful radio voice of Miss Susan Watson. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-48255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. You can email us at fortherecord. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. You can also WhatsApp us on 925-3261, where you can leave a text message or a voice note. If you leave a voice note, that voice note will be played during the course of the show as well. For the first segment of the show this morning, I have no one in the studio, but it is expected that we will have, after the 8 o'clock news, the Honorable Alden McLaughlin, Premier of the Cayman Islands, with us. I'm not sure whether or not the Minister of Financial Services will be with us as well, but we certainly would welcome her if she's going to be here also. And I want to talk about the big issue that impacts the Cayman Islands, and really, I would say, has a lot to do with our very existence, at least as a attractive financial center, because of the threats that are looming overhead from outside influences as well. So you will see some of the headlines in the newspapers, either print or online. For instance, in the Caymanian Compass, the headline is UK to force Cayman territories to make company owners public. The Premier's office of the Premier, released a statement yesterday, and I will read that statement in its entirety to you. And in preparation for the Premier being on the show as well, I will give you some background information on this particular piece of legislation as well. And that piece of legislation is called the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill 2017-2019 in the UK House of Commons. Okay? So, the statement from the government, the Cayman Islands government reacts to the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill. The Cayman Islands government is deeply aggrieved by the acceptance of the UK government today of an amendment to the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill in the House of Commons. The Premier, in making this statement, was referring to the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill amendment that was accepted by the House of Commons on Tuesday, the 1st of May. It requires the British Overseas Territories, but not the Crown Dependencies. Take note of that. It requires the British Overseas Territories, but not the Crown Dependencies, to establish public registers of beneficial ownership information by no later than the 31st of December 2020. The Premier, the Honourable Alden McLaughlin, said, and I quote, "Imposition of legislation through powers that date back to the colonial era over and above the wishes of the democratically elected legislative bodies of the overseas territories represents a gross affront to the constitutional relationship we currently have with the United Kingdom. Further, imposing such an obligation on the overseas territories while exempting the Crown dependencies discriminates unfairly against the overseas territories. This amendment is based solely on prejudice and a willful misunderstanding of our current regulatory framework." The Minister for Financial Services, the Honourable Tara Rivers, added, and I quote, "Even more unfortunate, today's actions indicate that for political expediency, the UK has chosen to ignore Cayman's high level of ongoing cooperation, which is embedded in our laws and international agreements. Over 100 tax authorities globally, including HMRC and the UK crime agencies, already have access to information which states who owns what and how much in relation to Cayman companies. So we already have in place access to information which state who owns what and how much in relation to Cayman companies. Indeed, verified beneficial ownership information on Cayman structures has been available to the UK's legal, regulatory, and tax authorities for more than 15 years, and our agreement in the sharing of information with the United Kingdom authorities is of such strength that we have committed to reporting within 24 hours or within 1 hour in the case of a truly urgent situation. Central public registers are not the global standard. This is important to note as well. Premier Alden McLaughlin went on to state, and I quote him again, "Since 2013, I have been completely clear that when public registers become a global standard, the Cayman Islands will adopt them. The actions of the House of Commons today seeks to impose the UK's own flawed system of unverified public registers upon the overseas territories by the end of 2020. The Premier also noted the apparent double standard adopted by the House of Commons during the debate on the same amendment bill, when it voted down an amendment to the UK's Companies Act, which would have required due diligence on beneficial ownership of UK companies in order to prevent money laundering. The government of the Cayman Islands is keeping all options on the table, including a legal challenge to the amendment, which violates accepted and conventional constitutional relationships between the UK and the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands has its own democratically elected government and is not represented in the UK Parliament. The actions of the House of Commons in seeking to legislate for the Cayman Islands amounts to constitutional overreach and are reminiscent of the worst injustices of bygone era of colonial despotism. And I have to read that again for it to really get the effect. The actions of the House of Commons in seeking to legislate for the Cayman Islands amounts to constitutional overreach. That means that they are going beyond their constitutional bounds and are reminiscent of the worst injustices of bygone era. And we can talk about some of those injustices, like the Windrush generation, what has happened to them and what they're trying to correct now, of colonial despotism. And I want to remind you, and some of our callers like Mr. Hurlston will remind you, we're still in overseas territories. We're still a colony of the United Kingdom. We are still a colony as well. We have one caller, Ms. Susan. Do we want to take the break first? We're going to take one caller, then take a break and take the other two callers after. Let's go to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, O.C.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm well, and you? I listen to the current situation here with this register, this beneficial ownership register.
Mm-hmm.
I have one question for you because I haven't been in tune with the news of the day. Is the UK itself going to have this beneficial ownership itself?
They have a registry already. They already have one.
Oh, they have one already?
Yes.
Okay, well, why is it, the next question I have then, why is it they're only making it to the British overseas territory and not the
Crown dependencies?
The Crown dependencies.
Yes, well, they always have had a history of treating some overseas territories different than others. It's like, some families that treat half siblings different than they treat whole siblings. There's an old colonial saying, kith and kin. So we look at instances like in 2002 when they finally granted British citizenship to some of the overseas territories. They had already done so for the Falklands and some of their other overseas territories that were, much closer in terms of ancestry and lineage to them.
Right.
They did that first. So they have a history of doing that, but I will do a little bit more research on this. And of course, when the Premier comes in, I will ask him to expand on that. The contradiction that they have where they're treating the Crown dependencies different than the overseas territories.
I think the time has come now for us to really start to think in the road of independence.
Yes.
Because I mean, the British is just really they're just out to ruin us. There's no question about it. They're out to ruin us. I don't care how you want to twist it. England is out to ruin the Cayman Islands, and anybody else who have any who they believe is getting ahead of them. They're out to ruin us, and that's simple as it go. We need to really start doing what Mr. Miller talks about. Going to them and saying, listen, we're going to set a date for independence. We ain't scared of you.
Yep.
You know, it's got to stop now, you know.
And caller, just before you go, I should also add to that whatever decision that the government makes in relation to how they approach this, if they decide to go the legal route and challenge the UK's ability to impose an order in council on the Cayman Islands with a duly elected legislative assembly here, then that is one thing. I believe that we, if not have a referendum on this issue, that we should have a public survey to find out exactly where the people of the Cayman Islands want to go, because this is not only going to affect the financial services industry of the Cayman Islands, this is going to affect all of the people of the Cayman Islands. Going to ask you to leave us there, caller. Thank you very much. We're going to take a commercial break. When we return, we have 2 more callers that we will try to accommodate before 8 o'clock news. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. Without any further introduction, I'm going to go straight to the phone lines because we want to accommodate both callers before we go to 8 o'clock news. So we're going to ask you to be as succinct as possible. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Not bad, yourself?
Fine, thanks.
Just want to share with you, which I'm pretty sure you're aware of what is happening in this country, but a lot of people doesn't know. So I just want to share with them that doesn't know what is happening in this country. Regarding the boardwalk in South Sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was like about 6 different contractors that bid on that project. All right. I was asked by one of the local firms if I would work along with them.
Mm-hmm.
And my part would be to do the woodwork and the tricks and some of the railing and stuff like that is going to be installed in it.
Okay.
And his partner, the contractor, was going to be doing all of the foundation, the piling, the footings, and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, what happened? That thing has dragged along for about a year, okay? And it has changed the whole complete plans of what it was from the beginning, all right? And no tendering bids has went back out to anybody. It was still, after all of this time and after all of the changes that was made, you would think that they would put that back out for tendering. They did not. They gave it to the company. I'm not going to call their name because everybody knows who is doing that sidewalk, that boardwalk in South Sound. All they have to do, if they don't know, is go by and they see their signs up.
So what? So you're not involved in the project then?
Absolutely not. Okay. And I need you to drive across there and tell me how many Caymanians you see that is there that is involved in it. If there's any Caymanians, I can guarantee you, it's a paper Caymanian. All right? But this is the kind of slackness. I mean, after 1 year, you would think that would go back out for tendering. It did not. That company still ended up winning that bid, which their bid was a lot lower than everybody else. And it just so happened that me and this contractor had to satisfy ourselves. So we went by there Sunday to take some photos to see the quality of work that was being done. Because me driving by there every morning, every afternoon, every lunchtime during the day, things didn't look the way that I thought they should have been from a professional standpoint. Mm-hmm. We went, we took some photos. The ledgers that they are putting on the inside of the concrete walls to put the beams to carry the tracks, there's no vapor barrier in between that concrete and that board.
Caller, I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to allow you to go into detail simply because we don't have enough time. We still have one more caller and we only have about 4 minutes left to go. So you basically, your question is, your point is, number one, it didn't go back out to tender after a year, and number two, you don't believe that there are many Caymanians employed there, and something should be looked into.
and somebody needs to inspect that project, because what they're doing there is poor foolishness. The connection with the beams that is on the flat is not connected properly to the pilings that they're putting in, and they're getting away with all of this.
You may want to alert planning to that. Maybe the planning can have their inspectors go up there and take a look at it as well. Thank you very much, caller, for that. Let's go to our last caller before the break. The other caller that we have on hold, we'll have to take them after the 8 o'clock news. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. For the Record.
Good morning, Doc. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, sir?
Fine, thanks.
Well, I see that the chickens are coming home to the roost.
Barely hearing you. I'm barely hearing you. I'm not sure if getting an echo. Not sure if there's a speakerphone.
See that the chickens are coming home to the roost.
Yes, sir.
The truth. They didn't want us to dispense the truth to the Caymanian people, and now the chickens are coming home to the roost. The truth cannot be hidden. When the truth is like water, it finds its own level. And what I would like to say, whatever the Premier or any of them said, I see a lot of stuff by Tim Ridley and by Truman Travis and a whole lot of those people. It's all political theater. It's all political theater, because the truth is that our Constitution says that the executive authority of the Cayman Islands is vested in Her Majesty.
Yep.
The Constitution. And now they are going to impose order in council. Well, the Constitution itself is an order in council of Her Majesty's Privy Council in the United Kingdom. So all of this crap about taking the United Kingdom to court and all that kind of stuff is only political theater, perhaps for the people they serve, to make sure say that, oh, we're going to do something about it. We are what Mickey and all of us have been saying. We are a colonial country. The British government owns us. We are their servants. We belong to them. Our Constitution says so. And anybody who does not understand that does not understand political science and does not understand the British system of government. They can do whatever they want with us, and there's nothing we can do about it.
If I can steal a little bit of your time there, in reading the debate that took place in one of the committees, and this was on the 6th of March of this year, and when they withdrew this, and then one of the MPs said about Alan Duncan, he said the minister refers to them as overseas territories, but it has British in front of it. They are British overseas territories. That goes to show you the thinking.
Yes, but that has nothing to do, and so they can do whatever they want with us. You see what they do with their own people?
Yeah.
They've exempted their own people. They were exempted their own people from all of this. And now, what's going to happen? It's like one of the men said, I think it was Ridley or one of them, there's going to be a outflow of business.
Yep.
And they're going to go to other places.
They're going to go to all those dark places, that don't have equivalent legislation.
Like Jamaica, who's been putting their infrastructure for this for years now, and so they don't want to educate the Caymanian people about their position, and they run around her like as if they can't talk to Caymanian people, and rushing up in England in the face of these people. They do not understand, and most of them really have not studied political science. They have not studied constitutional law, and they do not understand how the British system works. I am not happy, because what's going to happen now? All of those Caymanian people who working in the industry are now going to come down. They're going to be poor class. And then what's going to happen to the poorer class now?
But Doc, shouldn't the people of the Cayman Islands have some say in terms of where the direction that we should take in this? I said earlier this morning that there should at least be, if not a referendum, some survey to determine what direction the people of the Cayman Islands want to take with this, because it is not only going to affect the financial industry. But Doc, I'm going to ask you to leave us there because we have to go now, but we will be back on at 8:15, and this there's going to be a lot more discussion on this as well. We may have to have For the Record on Sunday morning, on this one as well. Folks, please stay tuned. For the Record will be back immediately after the 8 o'clock news. And welcome back to For the Record. As I promised you, we would have government officials with us. The Honorable Premier hasn't reached here yet, but we're expecting him. But it is my pleasure to have in the studio with me now the Honorable Tara Rivers, Minister responsible for financial services and home affairs. Minister, good morning. Welcome back to For the Record, an unscheduled appearance, but
well, I did say I'm prepared and willing to come back, so I'm definitely happy to be back this morning, and thank you for inviting us, OC.
And thank you very, very much. For the benefit of our listening and viewing audience, I'll just do a little introduction here, and this is from the House of Commons website. Latest news on the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill, HL 2017-2019, and it says the bill was considered at report stage and third reading on Tuesday, the 1st of May, 2018, and passed with amendments. The bill has passed all common stages and will now be returned to the House of Lords, a stage known as ping pong. During ping pong, the bill travels back and forth between the two houses until both houses agree on the text of the bill. So that is the next stage is that the UK House of Parliament, that is the House of Commons and the House of Lords, will take as well. And a summary of the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill 2017-2019. It is a bill to make provisions for enabling sanctions to be imposed where appropriate for the purposes of compliance with the United Nations obligation or other international obligations, or for the purposes of furthering the prevention of terrorism, or for the purposes of national security or international peace and security, or for the purposes of furthering foreign policy objectives, to make provisions for the purposes of the detection, investigation, and prevention of money laundering and terrorist financing, and for the purposes of implementing standards published by the Financial Action Task Force relating to combating threats to the integrity of the international financial system and for connected purposes. That's a lot there, and I believe some of it is smoke and mirrors as well.
Well, I mean, I really want to pick up on the last point that you made, and that is the stated purpose about importing in their, I guess, domestic legislation, the principles and requirements of the Financial Action Task Force as it relates to dealing with money laundering and anti-money laundering efforts. And the very first thing that is glaringly incongruent with the position that they've taken with respect to the overseas territories, and I think it is important to note that it is restricted in terms of their acceptance of this amendment to draft a bill for consideration to implement public registers, that is the Order in Council for overseas territories. It is restricted to overseas territories and does not include Crown dependencies. Now, we can get into that discussion in a bit, but the point is the public registers as a standard is not adopted by the FATF. It is not a global standard. It is not deemed to be the standard that the countries should adhere to with respect to fighting money laundering. It has actually been stated on a number of occasions, but both, I think, by the FATF and a former National Crime Agency director in the UK itself, about the risks of a public register that is not verified. And that is exactly what pertains and exists in the United Kingdom right now. So the fact that they are saying, on one hand, that the intention is to adopt these standards pursuant to the FATF, but on the other hand is expecting the overseas territories only and not the Crown dependencies to implement a system that would be inferior to the one that we have now. Our system is a verified beneficial ownership collection by regulated service providers. That flies in the face of what they are seemingly espousing as it relates to that particular bill. The other, I think, the issue that certainly, as I said, it it's a very unfortunate position that the United Kingdom has taken in this particular instance as it relates to the overseas territories. It really flies in the face of the kind of constitutional relationship that we have, the respect that we have been trying to ensure that we continue to espouse in our various meetings and cooperation that we have actually been demonstrating. I think the fact that they completely ignored all of those efforts that we've taken over the many decades to cooperate with not just the United Kingdom regulatory, tax, and crime agencies, but internationally as well. The fact that they could, just as in the words of Sir Alan Duncan himself, the decision was taken purely because they wanted to appease the sentiments, what they saw to be the overwhelming sentiment of the people in the chamber as it relates to this particular issue with respect to the overseas territories. But that sentiment and those sentiments, there were no facts that were put forward during that debate to actually substantiate the need to impose or the need to try to make this situation a reality by 2020. And again, it was political expediency at its best. They traded the interests of the overseas territories to protect the interests of the Crown dependencies, and it was a way to ensure that they didn't, have another loss. As we know, that the government's position is very, very tenuous, yes. and so as a result, I think Cayman was a casualty of that situation. And I think, we as a jurisdiction, we're very proud of all that we've done to try to address the concerns with respect to money laundering. We have, recently gone through our FATF assessment, and so we're still working through the finality of that process. But based on past assessments up to this point, we have been deemed to be compliant with G20 principles. We have no issues as it relates to the general principle of our tax transparency. We have been recently assessed by the OECD in 2017 to be largely compliant, which is in the company of countries like Canada, Australia. The United Kingdom still hasn't gone through their most recent assessment by the OECD, which is actually with higher and more stringent requirements, but we still maintain that rating. We've also, as you know, gone through the process, and we're still in dialogue with the European Union, specifically on one point, and that is substance, and their issue of their concerns related to economic substance, which is yet to be defined, by the way. But with respect to the other criteria that we were reviewed and assessed on by the EU, one of them being tax transparency and the exchange of information, they had no issues with that. So again, that was the most recent affirmation that the Cayman Islands is not a secrecy jurisdiction by both the OECD standards, the EU standards, and most recently, there was a report from the U.S. State Department that actually indicates what we've said. This is a 2018 report that also outlines that, the Cayman Islands does not have the secrecy legislation that people are trying to espouse, and the rhetoric that was very much behind the decision that was taken in the House of Commons yesterday.
Mm-hmm. We still have that caller, Ms. Susan. One caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor.
Good morning, sir.
I'm sorry I have a bit of a croaky voice, but that the United Kingdom would impose this at this time should not have come as a surprise to us. For I recall vividly in 1995, when Gilbert McLean and I went to the FCO, there was a young, brash, arrogant man in the Caribbean and Atlantic Division who at the time was supervised by a man called Charles Drace Francis. Patrick would have told us in clear and unmistakable English that the Cayman Islands had better get out of the international financial business, because when the United Kingdom, were finished with us, there would be nothing for us in that business. And when Gilbert and I posed the question as to what we should then do, he said, take my advice, invest in tourism infrastructure, get long-haul aircraft, and build up your tourism industry, because we are tired of complaints by France, the United States, Canada, and all these countries about what you all are doing. So when we came back and we reported our experience. We were laughed at by the then leader of government business in the Legislative Assembly, who proceeded to make some joke that we were locked out of the FCO. The second point I wish to make is a fundamental and more profound point. Anyone who studied international relations and read of the Peloponnesian War will understand that the weak can never dictate terms to the strong. And in these matters, the Cayman Islands are weak. So we will never be able to dictate terms to the United Kingdom and all these other countries and the agencies which they set up. I have said shamelessly that we should have embarked on a path to self-determination long ago by ensuring that we had a proper educational system and were educating our people for the future. That, sir, is my take on this, because we will never win this war. And like Dr. McField said, the chickens have now come home to roost.
Thank you very much for that, caller. Thank you very much. Minister?
Well, yes, and I want to thank the caller for the contribution that was made, and just to address a few points that I think that he highlighted, to say the kind of work that we have been doing, and certainly his perspective, as he indicated, from the early 90s is a lot earlier than mine. So I was still in high school in those days, so I can't comment on the experiences that he had, as he said just now in his call during that time, but I certainly can't comment on the experiences that I've had since taking this position in 2017. As you will recall, I certainly made the attempt to engage directly with one of the key proponents of this campaign. And this campaign, as I believe he alluded to, certainly has been ongoing for a number of years, and if you take his perspective, a number of decades. When I met with Dame Margaret Hodge, it was very clear that it had nothing to do with the facts. It had nothing to do with understanding and trying to actually fight financial crime as it relates to what is best practice. It was a political campaign that she and many of her colleagues were on to ensure that she could say that she was the champion of this particular initiative. So that was instructive and helpful for me to get that information firsthand in our dialogue. Like I said, it was very interactive and very engaging, but I left there not under any illusions that the intention was to sway her and those that were on a campaign that had nothing to do and bear on the facts. It was just more important to get an understanding about how we can approach the situation. As I said, starting in 2017, in my particular capacity, we engaged on a much more robust political engagement strategy. I think that with respect to, we saw the recent vote in the House of Lords on this same point, to the caller's perspective. Yes, in one hand, it is no surprise that the United Kingdom government is taking this view or taking this position. I think the way they went about it was something that we as a government are not prepared to accept in that regard. But the fact is, we worked and we've continued to work, and I'm sure it preceded me because he talked about his experience in advocating for the Cayman Islands. So I'm sure that many ministers before me have done the same. But I know we have worked very diligently behind the scenes to get the information, to get the factual basis, to try to temper some of the political rhetoric that we keep hearing. And of course, we were successful in the round at the House of Lords when the vote was taken and they voted down the provision at that time. In actual fact, I believe the mood on the ground was that they thought they were going to lose that vote. But because of the information, because of the kinds of advocacy, and because of the arguments largely put forward by Lord Ahmed in his response on behalf of the government, they were able to sway a number of lords to vote down the provision based, as I said, on facts. Unfortunately, in this position, in this situation, there was no even attempt to debate the amendment, and so that opportunity was lost. The government just conceded outright, as I said, in to the detriment of the overseas territories, to protect the interests of the Crown dependencies as one of the issues.
Okay, we have to go to a commercial break now, folks. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly, and we will be joined by the Honourable Alden McLaughlin, Premier of the Cayman Islands as well. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio, we have with us now the Honourable Premier of the Cayman Islands, Honourable Alden McLaughlin. Mr. Premier, good morning. Welcome to For the Record, sir.
Good morning, OC. It's good to be here. Good morning to the listening public.
Right. We have two callers, so what we're going to do, we're going to take those two callers. I'll give you an opportunity to address what they may have to say. Hopefully it's in regard to, what we're talking about as well. And then we're going to cut the calls off for a while because we want to give both the Premier and Minister Rivers an opportunity to explain to our listening and our viewing audience, to the people of the Cayman Islands, what has transpired and what we can expect to happen in terms of what they can tell us at this stage. We don't want to let out too much of the strategy, but at least to say, where do we go from here? So let's take those two callers. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Doc, again.
Yes, me again. I just would like to disagree with what the minister said just now about the relationship between Cayman Islands and United Kingdom. It is not a personal business relationship. It is a constitutional, legal relationship. And she's talking about how government. You do not have a government. Section 43 of the Constitution states the executive authority of the Cayman Islands is vested in Her Majesty, and said, subject to this Constitution, the executive authority of the Cayman Islands shall be exercised on behalf of Her Majesty by the government consisting of the governor as Her Majesty's representative and the cabinet. So Cayman Islands does not have any government. The government that they have is Her Majesty's government, and the Her Majesty in England can do whatever they want with the Cayman Islands. There is nothing you can do. It is pure political theater. And when you look at the Constitution itself, it's an order in council. It's an order in the Her Majesty Privy Council, and it gets its power from the West Indies Act 1962 that gives Her Majesty power to make orders in council. And so the Constitution itself is an order in council. And if they are going to make an order in council to force disclosure of beneficial interest companies, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. What you should do is what they were saying to BVI. Go and invest in agriculture and in tourism. Because to go and fight the United Kingdom in the court when all the other countries are against this business that we're doing here, and the United Kingdom is only doing what she's forced to do by her allies. Canada, United Kingdom, the United States, France, and all those other countries. We have no government. We are a colony. We belong to them. They own us. And to say that we have this great relationship with them, we do not have any great relationship with them. Our relationship is a constitutional one, and it's very clear what it says in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And I would like you to remind you that we do not have any government here. Whatever we do here in the cabinet or in the legislature is on behalf of the Her Majesty in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. For that, we're going to take one final call, and then we're going to cut the phone lines off for a while. We're going to open them back up again later on. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doc.
Good morning, Mr. Premier.
Good morning, sir.
And good morning, Honorable Tara Rivers.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. I couldn't miss this opportunity to have Dr. Roy Budd, Dr. Steve McPhail, and now myself speak on this particular issue. And I'm not trying to rough anybody up, but I'm very aware that Mr. McLaughlin or Premier McLaughlin has a better understanding of politics and history and constitutional law than he might sometimes make people to believe. He's very aware of what colonial relationships produced. There is nothing from a subservient relationship that will ever end in those people that are being subservient being given liberty and the freedom to make decisions, to make themselves totally human and equal to those persons that they're subjected to. And I'm speaking a little bit on a philosophical level to illustrate the point that when we are told by people that come here that we have autonomy, that we have power to determine what will happen in our own country, we know that they are misleading us. The liberal approach towards colonialism that was developed after the Second World War is something that have led people to believe that there is autonomy in these relationships. But at the end of the day, what determines the outcome will be the economic interests of the dominant parties in the relationship. In this particular case, it's the United Nations, it's the United Kingdom, it's the United Kingdom and its friends in Europe and its friends in America, that they want to have a tighter control of money, not because of terrorism, but because they feel that it is their inherent God-given right to dominate the world, and the only way that it can dominate the world and remain to dominate the world is through the control of the world finances, and that the Cayman Islands have cut into that little niche there, or that control there, and what they're trying to do is to remove the Cayman Islands and return the control, the financial control of Britain back to the city of London. And if we see what has happened with regards to the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, we can see that the United Kingdom is creating its own unique financial power again. And therefore, the Cayman Islands cannot be trusted in this venture because we are not like them, we are not part of them, and this is becoming very evident. So it's just, like I said, the chickens are coming home to roost, and we need to prepare our people to the understanding that we need to diversify our economy and that we need to not give up the financial services industry, but we need to think about other alternatives as well at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Doc. We still have about 3 minutes before we go to the break, so I want to respond.
Well, thank both Doctors McField for their contributions. I think what Dr. Frank said is dead right. I really take issue with nothing that he said at all. The rather more pessimistic view of Dr. Steve is another matter. I don't want to get into a constitutional argument about the authority, but I just need to correct something. The executive authority of the United Kingdom is also vested in Her Majesty and is exercised in the United Kingdom by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. So our Constitution, which is a written one, unlike the UK one, is expressed in similar terms. The executive authority in these islands is exercised on behalf of Her Majesty by the Governor, acting as the UK government's representative, and the Cabinet. We fought for years for that provision because the UK government at the time, the FCO, did not want the split between the Governor and her, as Her Majesty's representative, and the Cabinet to be expressed. To be expressly made in the Constitution. And also you might remember this because you were Cabinet Secretary at the time. It's an important distinction. But there's no question. What we have, the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, is an order made by Her Majesty's Privy Council. The Cayman Islands is a British overseas territory, and ultimately Her Majesty reserves the right to legislate for the territory in the interest of what is called peace, order, and good government. Until the day that we become an independent nation, there will always be an ultimate reserve. in the Constitution which gives or reserves to the UK government, Her Majesty, the ability to ultimately make decisions for the territory. We have chosen so far to remain a British territory, so we have to operate within those particular constraints. And I am not suggesting that that is not ultimately the case. But the 2009 Constitution we have has moved our constitutional position and our autonomy way beyond the original Constitution of 1972, where Cabinet was simply an advisory body to the governor, and the governor had the power to legislate. Even the laws were made in the name of the governor. We passed them down the Legislative Assembly, but they were actually made by the governor under the 1972 Constitution up until 2009. And Cabinet is no longer an advisory body. Cabinet has full power and responsibility with respect to every aspect of government except the special responsibilities, right, which are defense, national security, the public service, and so forth. So, yes, the nuclear weapon of the Ordnance Council is there. But what has transpired in this particular instance has gone way beyond that. What we have now is the House of Commons arrogating to itself the power to make legislation for the overseas territories.
And not the cabinet.
Right. So this issue constitutionally goes way beyond the issue of public registers. And it is an issue that we are going to challenge, because if we wind up in a situation where every time the UK Parliament disagrees with a decision in one of the territories, it has the power to legislate for us, then it's not just the issue of public registers, it's not just the future of our financial industry that is at risk, it is our very existence. So this is a much bigger issue than the immediate one. Actually, we believe we can manage and we will manage this proposal that the overseas territories must introduce public registers by 2020. I mean, there's a real question whether that will ever happen. The UK is in a very, very weak position. It claims it has public registers, but the information is unverified and unreliable, and has been found to be that way by their own national crime agency. It is not a global standard, and the chances of it ever becoming a global standard, I think, are decreasing all the time, particularly as the UK gets set to exit the European Union. So there are big constitutional issues here. Yeah. I think you want to go to a break.
Yeah, we'll take a commercial break now, folks. Please stay tuned. When we return, the conversation will continue with the Honourable Alden McLaughlin, Premier of the Cayman Islands, and Honourable Tara Rivers, Minister responsible for Financial Services and Home Affairs. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Premier Honourable Alden McLaughlin, Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs, Honourable Tara Rivers. We're discussing the bill. It was debated in the House of Commons yesterday, the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill 2017-2019. I think Minister Rivers.
Well,
stop before
if I might just finish
sure.
the discussion and to try to explain what has happened. Okay. Right. When I took office as Premier in May of 2013, one of the very first issues on the table, and we were summoned, all overseas territory leaders were actually summoned to London by the then Prime Minister David Cameron to talk about this issue of public registers. So this has been on the table for quite a long time. He was trying, as Prime Minister, who was then President of the EU. He was trying to get this introduced as essentially a global standard. Well, over the course of the years that have ensued since, Cayman and the other territories have worked very hard with the UK to demonstrate to them that the systems that we have are, in fact, superior to what any of the rest of them have. We've been keeping records of beneficial ownership information for 15 plus years. And ours is verified because, as the minister said when she spoke earlier to this point, the service providers are required as a matter of law to know your customer and to keep that information. So through an exchange, what's called an exchange of notes, we have worked for the last 2+ years developing and agreeing a platform by which this information can be shared in appropriate circumstances with the National Crime Agency, with tax regulators in the UK, where they have, if not immediate access to it, certainly access within 24 hours. Right? So if you talk to any of the people who administer the crime agencies, the tax regulatory authorities, they will tell you Cayman is a model for how this thing should be done. But the rhetoric continues to reign and to overpower the realities, because it's just good politics to blame the overseas territories for everything that goes wrong. I mean, of course, no one would ever suggest that there could possibly be money laundering in London. I mean, that's just beyond the pale. That could never happen. It's just overseas territories, apparently, where this could possibly occur. So we've been working for years now with them. And what transpired yesterday was, quite frankly, treachery on the part of the UK government. It betrayed the trust of the overseas territories. It betrayed not just verbal, but written commitments to the territories about how we would deal with this issue. Yes, we know that the UK government politically is quite weak because it has a 7-seat majority. Yes, we know there was a rebellion in the ranks, and we had Conservative members prepared to back this Labour,
at least 20 of them,
amendment. And so the UK government was in a very difficult place. And we knew that there was a very real risk, probably higher than that the amendments would succeed. That is, amendments requiring the overseas territories. There were 2 separate amendments proposed. That was called the Hodge-Mitchell Amendment, named after the 2 principal proponents of it, and a separate amendment which proposed similar treatment for the Crown dependencies.
Okay. Yeah, one of our callers actually asked that question about the Crown dependencies, so it's very good that you're mentioning that now, because that'll explain to him exactly what happened there.
So the government's very belated response to that was to put forward a compromise amendment bill, which would have, had it passed, well, had it been accepted in the first place, would have had the effect of essentially only requiring the overseas territories and Crown dependencies to put in place public registers when that became a global standard as established by the FATF. Now, that's something we could live with. I've said since 2013 that when public registers for beneficial ownership become a global standard, Cayman is will be among the first to be there, because we're ready to do it. I mean, we have the systems in place and we have the information, so we can do it. But the Speaker rejected that compromise amendment bill on the basis that it had been filed too late and was, from what I gather, of dubious constitutionality. I'm not sure what that means or why that was the case, but that's what I've been told. So the government is then merely hours away from the start of this debate. And in this big bad world of politics, what transpired is what the minister said. In an effort to appease the lobby for the CDs, the government made a deal and traded the interests of the overseas territories to keep the CDs from having the obligation to put in place public registers and to avoid another defeat on the Brexit bill by the government, because each defeat it gets makes it appear even weaker. So what has transpired has nothing to do with principle. It has nothing to do with what is right. It's just ugly, raw politics. And unfortunately, as the Windrush fiasco has demonstrated, while the UK will continue to protest that it is the champion of human rights and insist that its overseas territories adhere to these, when push comes to shove, the ancient prejudices remain. And there is no question that they view the ethnically and geographically different overseas territories in a completely different light than they do the crown dependencies.
We're not kith and kin.
Right. So it's like, another version of Animal Farm. Everybody is equal, but some are more equal than others.
Okay. Let's see how much time we have before we go to headline. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes,
Well,
2 minutes
I want to thank the Premier for kind of really outlining, and I don't want to, obviously, and I don't need to regurgitate or actually reiterate some of the clarifications and constitutional clarifications that the Premier put forward in response to Mr. Steve MacPhail's contribution. But I do want to point out that there is within our Constitution as well, that has been obviously agreed by the United Kingdom and given to the Cayman Islands, there is a provision as it relates to the right to privacy. And so I think that is an issue that, for anybody to suggest that there is nothing that we can do and we must throw our hands up and just go and start farming, not to throw any aspersions on farmers. I'm sitting right next to a very avid one. I think that is certainly not a position that any responsible government should take. I think also that the statement about saying that this move is being pushed by US and Canada for public registers is also wrong. The OECD, which includes those countries and many other countries, have actually stated in a report, Keeping It Safe, that basically in order, and as it relates to tax authorities, not supporting public registers, because they feel that, in order for people to comply with their obligations under the law, taxpayers need to have confidence that the often sensitive financial information is not disclosed inappropriately, whether intentionally or by accident. And so there is this argument that people are trying to conflate the idea of protecting legitimate privacy equates to secrecy. And that is absolutely not the case. As I said, the fact is we share tax information both on demand as well as automatically with over 100 tax authorities through the Common Reporting Standards, which we have adopted, which again are the global standards that are espoused by the OECD. So this idea that, you can hide money in Cayman no longer exists for the exchange of information. And as I said, we don't have these secrecy laws that allow us to not collect this information for opening bank accounts and otherwise.
Folks, you're hearing it here from the Honourable Premier, Honourable Alden McLaughlin, as well as the Honourable Tara Rivers. We're talking about the sanctions and anti-money laundering bill in the UK. We're talking about the political implications of that as well. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back after headline news. Record in the studio with me, and Honourable Alden McLaughlin, Premier of the Cayman Islands, Honourable Tara Rivers, Minister for Financial Services and Home Affairs. We have a few callers. We're going to take those calls. We're asking callers to please restrict yourself to the subject that we're talking about. No callers now. Okay, we lost them. But when you do call, we want to restrict it to the topic that we're talking about. I know lots of you say, oh, well, we got a Premier on. No, let me ask him, what's happening in my constituency or what. This morning, it's a very important topic that we're talking about. I think this goes to our very existence here in the Cayman Islands, at least as a financial for financial services and everything else as well. So we have one caller. And after that caller, we're going to ask the Premier and the Minister to give us the distinction between a publicly accessible register and just a normal register, if I may call it that. I think I'm not describing it properly, but the experts here will do that for me as well. Let's take the caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to Mr. O.C. Good morning to the Premier.
Good morning,
and
sir.
Good morning to Ms. Rivers, Minister of Financial Services.
Good morning.
This is Johan Moxham.
Good morning.
I just want to start off by saying I commend you both for the positions that you've taken publicly, showing up on radio, and the press releases and statements from yesterday. Now's the time for us to show strength. I'm not a constitutional expert. I am in no way, shape, or form as learned as Dr. McPhail and all of the others that have served this country. But I think both of you are doing a great job. I am thankful that you are taking such a stern position and assessing all options. And it's effectively time now for every Caymanian and every person that loves the Cayman Islands to circle the wagons, throw their support behind the Premier and Minister of Finance, Ms. Rivers there, and let's get the boat rowing in one direction. We can't afford any division. What these people are up against is global politics at the highest level. It's as clear as day. Ray Charles could see that Theresa May's government effectively traded away the British dependent territories in order to placate the mob inside of Parliament. But I think you guys are doing the right thing. I just wanted to offer my support. The funny thing about politics, if you did nothing, they would kill you for it. So the fact that you're choosing to take a position of strength and assess all options, I say to you, thank you, stay the course. Every right-minded Caymanian is with you. If I can help in any way, shape, or form, because this is about love of country. Now is not the time for our usual tribal politics, but we are seeing politics being played against the Cayman Islands, an industry that represents 56% of its GDP. And if people don't understand what that means for our country, they need to do some research and understand the financial services industry effectively drives the economy of the Cayman Islands. It drives development and so many other subsectors. But again, I just wanted to say, Mr. Premier, Ms. Rivers, thank you. Stay the course. Godspeed. And let's not roll over and play dead, because this is about the future of the Cayman Islands and what separates us from our neighbors. The fact that these guys have chosen to breach such fundamental agreements and things that they put to you in writing gives you a fantastic position should you choose to go that way. But I'm with you, and just wanted to say thank you for that. Good luck, guys.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan. And you're very right. And I'm happy to say on my way here I was on the phone with Governor Chowdhury, who is in our corner. And I was also on the phone with the leader of the opposition. I'm meeting with him shortly, because we have, as Johan has said, we have to have a concerted and unified front on this issue. And I can also say that on behalf of the government, I have retained two of the UK's top constitutional lawyers who are looking at this issue, because this issue goes, as I said earlier, well beyond the issue of us being forced down the road of public registers. If the UK Parliament can, in fact, legislate for us every time they disagree with a position that we take, then our corners are very dark.
I also want to echo my thanks and gratitude for Johan publicly supporting the government, and I think he is absolutely right. This is certainly the time for us as elected officials, as persons in the industry, to really come together to ensure that we do what is in the best interests of the Cayman Islands and protecting, preserving, promoting and growing our financial services industry. I think he has underscored the importance of the industry to the economy. I do, as I've said in previous statements, this, and as the Premier has said as well, this is, something that may never come to fruition. It's 2.5 years from now that the trigger was supposed to be pulled, so to speak. So business will continue as usual. We are already demonstrating that we are adhering to and we will continue to evolve our standards as standards evolve. And that is why we are the jurisdiction of choice for many lines of business in the financial services industry. And our clients know that, and the industry, we've been working very closely with industry representatives, Cayman Finance, to keep them in the loop, working to make sure that we are all of one accord when it comes to addressing this issue in order to preserve, and I said, the way of life as we've come to know it here in the Cayman Islands, but also the product that we offer to the world, the service, the global clearinghouse of meeting of minds, of capital for investors and investments in order to benefit not just our local economy, but the global financial services economy. And that is the message that for some reason or another, the tabloids, the headlines don't want to carry. They want to carry the rhetoric. And I think it's certainly time for us to continue to address those issues head on. And I do thank him for his support, and I look forward to the continued support of industry as we look to ensure that we do what is best for our country.
Okay. Now, the explanation on what a publicly accessible register is as opposed to any other feature.
Well, what as the Premier indicated, what has been agreed, and it is a system that far kind of exceeds what most countries have to date, is we have agreed with the United Kingdom to implement the central register for beneficial ownership. As was mentioned earlier, and it's important to reiterate, we as a jurisdiction have been collecting the beneficial ownership information for at least 15 years. So the collection of beneficial ownership for us is nothing new. Many jurisdictions currently don't even do that, much less have a central register or a central repository. So we are, as in this regard, we're not just adhering, but in many instances we are exceeding what is global standards. What we have agreed to implement and in the process of populating to date is the central register, whereby the access to information can be done on a much more timely basis, as the Premier indicated, within 24 hours, and certainly if there is a real need as necessary, possibly within 1 hour, and that is to facilitate either the crime agencies in the UK or the tax authorities to have information if they have any concerns, or if there's any investigations going on that they require, information from us in this regard. But it is not a public register. It is a register that is fit for purpose, for the intended purpose of ensuring that we continue to enhance our efforts to fight potential financial crimes, money laundering, terrorist financing, etc. It is a register that allows the agencies that need to have this information to have this information in a much more efficient manner, and a manner that does not raise issues or concerns of tipping and otherwise, which was, I think, a part of the desire to move to such a register. What is being requested of the overseas territories, as we've indicated, and not the Crown dependencies, is to make the register public. That is, all in a sundry to collect this information. So what is happening currently in the United Kingdom, and we have documented examples of this as a result of having a public register that is not verified or regulated, shifting this idea that transparency must mean that every Tom, Dick, and Harry must know what your financial information is, your personal details, is causing people to actually either put false information. So the public register in the UK has, thousands of toddlers registered as owners of companies, and there's been a recent attempt, but most recently in November of last year, where an Italian journalist attempted to register a company in the name of a known mafia with the number 10 as their head office at Companies House, and they went as far as not paying the fee, because I think when you pay the fee is when you actually commit the crime. Yes. But it was a demonstration, again, about the inferiority of this public register that is being espoused as the standard. And there's certainly been calls within the United Kingdom to strengthen that system because of the flaws that this perception of having public makes it more somehow better for the fight of crime. And I think what transpired in the House of Commons yesterday was a glaring confirmation that this move to seek to have the overseas territories implement a public register because of this notion that we need to do more in the fight of crime, when they had the opportunity to correct some glaring gaps in their own system with respect to the collection of beneficial ownership information, they voted that down. So on the one hand, the kind of double standards that espouse is it can't go unnoticed. And I think that, again, it just confirms the position that we're taking, that we see what's happened. We know the play. We see that it was political expediency at its height. And we as a government, as a country, we need to do what we can to ensure that we stand for ourselves and protect the interests of our people.
We have to do what we must do at this stage. We're going to take a break now. We have a couple of callers, and I believe we have a voice note as well from WhatsApp. No? But we're going to take a commercial break, and we will take the two callers that are on the line. We're going to make those the last two callers as well, because, again, we have to have our Premier and Minister really elaborate and get as much out there as they need to get to the public at this stage. Please stay tuned for The Record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For The Record. In the studio with me this morning, Honourable Alden McLaughlin, Premier of the Cayman Islands, Honourable Tara Rivers, Minister for Financial Services and Home Affairs, discussing the UK's decision in relation to the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Bill 2017-2019. We have two callers. We're going to make those two calls the final calls for the morning, and then hopefully we will try to share with you either an excerpt or maybe the whole comments that were made by Sir Alan Duncan in the House of Commons yesterday as well. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For The Record.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Connor.
Good morning, sir.
Minister Rivers, and good morning to the Premier, Mr. McLaughlin.
Good morning,
Good
sir.
morning.
I think Johan said a lot of what I was going to say, so I'll thank him publicly for saying that now too, because it's important. Mm-hmm. But in relation to this particular issue, I want to say, the Premier, in many instances, gets me sometime when he speaks, because I'm not sure of exactly, how much he's putting behind it. But this morning, I can say, having listened to the entire program, I'm quite pleased to hear the words that he's using and choosing to use in this particular matter. It's one of those things that, we've got to come to understand now that nobody's really your friend when they're your competitor. And that is the bottom line in this particular situation. And it's important that we, as a country, get behind the entire government and the entire government's working together to solve this problem, which is the continuing bullying of our financial industry by the UK. It is unreasonable, it is uncalled for, it's unconscionable, and what it intends to do primarily is take us from the status of where we are and the standard of living that we now appreciate and have come to like, to a point where we are no longer that country that can afford such standards. And for me, that's something that I wouldn't sit back and allow to happen. And as Minister Rivers had said earlier on different occasions here, and repeating herself, and it's worth repeating, we in the Cayman Islands appreciate what we have achieved, and we have achieved it through hard work. And we've achieved it by adhering to all international standards in which everyone else is willing to adopt, not us first. The fact that we could implement such a register, if necessary tomorrow, speaks of our regulatory regime and that we're actually ahead of the international community in this area. So I'm not going to hold up all the time this morning, but, hearing the Minister on there and the Premier, I am very happy with the approach. And Premier, I'd like to say, use some more of those choice words that I've heard you say this morning, because those are the things that give us the confidence in leadership that is such required. And I feel good this morning hearing what you have to say, as well as Minister Rivers. Good morning.
Thank you very much, caller. And yes, the Premier can put it a little bit more elegantly than most of us. I go the rough way at times. Let's take the last caller. Caller, good morning.
Thank you.
Caller, good morning. Welcome to For The Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning to Minister Tara Rivers, and good morning to our Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin. This is George Eddie Banks.
Good morning, Miss
Good
Georgette.
morning, Miss Georgette.
Trust that all of you and your family members are well. And I am so proud of the way that you're speaking over the air and the strength and determination that both of you are showing. And I don't have very much to say except that I would advise both of you, and know that both of you believe that there is a God. Don't let pride get in the way. Always ask Him to give you wisdom and knowledge to always make the best decisions for our three islands. And the last thing I have to say is this. It just boils down to one simple sentence. It's all about they're jealous of us. They are jealous of us. And that is very wrong. They should be proud to know we have done so well. God bless you all, and thank you, Mr. O.C., for giving me all this time to run up my mouth. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Ms. Georgette, as well. What we're going to share with our listening audience now, and the viewing audience will be able to hear the audio as well when it's played back on government TV, is remarks made by Sir Alan Duncan in the House of Commons yesterday as well. Ms. Susan, go right ahead and play that for us.
Mr. Speaker, the arguments in this case, and the Honourable Lady or Honourable Lady may want to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. The arguments in this area are very finely balanced. We recognise the need to tackle illicit finances across the globe, including in the Crown dependencies and in the overseas territories. We are concerned, however, that the economic impact of imposing public registers on the overseas territories will be significant. Furthermore, the overseas territories are separate jurisdictions with their own democratically elected governments. They are responsible for their own fiscal matters, and they are not represented in this Parliament. Legislating for them without their consent effectively disenfranchises their elected representatives. We would have preferred to work consensually with the overseas territories to make those registers publicly available, as we've done in agreeing the exchanges of notes process. No, not for the moment, if you allow me for a second. We do not want to legislate directly for them, nor do we want to risk damaging our long-standing constitutional arrangements which respects their autonomy. However, we've listened to the strength of feeling in this House on this issue and accept that it is, without a doubt, the majority view of this House that the overseas territories should have public registers ahead of it becoming the international standard as set by the Financial Actions Task Force. We will accordingly respect the will of the House and will not vote against new Clause 6. What? Unless my right honourable friend seeks the leave of the House to withdraw it, we accept that this amendment will become part of the bill. In the same spirit, I would appreciate it if the Honourable Member for Bishop Auckland could choose not to move new Clause 14, which would add the Crown dependencies to this stipulation. Her Majesty's Government is acutely conscious of the sensitivities about this in the overseas territories and the response it may provoke. I therefore today give the overseas territories the fullest possible assurance that we will work very closely with them in shaping and implementing the Order in Council which this Act of Parliament might require. To that end, we will offer them the fullest possible legal and logistical support that they might ask of us. Alongside that, we retain our fullest respect for the overseas territories and their constitutional rights, and we will work with them to protect their interests. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
Platitudes, and he still threw us under the bus. And our half first cousins treated differently.
That is one of the most remarkable speeches I think I've ever heard in my almost 18 years in this political business. I just don't know how Sir Alan Duncan could believe that us in the territories could put any store in those assurances after the way the UK government has behaved. Those assurances ring very hollow to me, and I place absolutely no store in them. I have had these discussions about where Cayman is, and particularly with respect to public registers, with many in the UK, including the current Prime Minister and the one before her as well. And they know full well that Cayman's system is superior to theirs. As I said at the start, this is just raw politics. And we have been traded, the overseas territories, our interests have been traded for the CDs and to prevent the current UK government from suffering yet another defeat on an amendment to the bill. It's as simple as that. So we have to do what we think is in the best interest of these islands, not worrying about who gets offended or who doesn't get offended. I've spent almost 5 years building a solid relationship with a whole range of people in the United Kingdom and in the United Kingdom government. I have good personal relationships with a significant number of people in the UK government and the British Parliament. And there are many who will privately tell you how they disagree with these various things. The current FCO Minister, Lord Ahmad, Tariq Ahmad, has worked very, very hard on our behalf. He fought in the House of Commons to defeat a similar amendment just a short time ago.
Yes.
So this is not some sort of personal campaign I am on or the government is on. But we cannot let this stand. I am going to write to the Prime Minister about this matter, and I am going to seek an audience with her when I'm there next week. Next week, I think it is. I'll be in the UK on the 14th. Whenever that is done, next week or the week after, I can't remember now.
Week after.
But we cannot allow this to just stand, and that is why we are prepared. If we get the advice that there is a proper basis for it, to challenge this at the highest possible levels through the court system, because as I said, it's not just this instance of us being required to put in place public registers of beneficial ownership. It is the bigger question about the consequences to Cayman if the UK Parliament becomes of the belief that anytime there is significant disagreement between what they want and what the overseas territories think is in the overseas territories' best interest, that they can legislate for us. We are doomed if that is the case. And then we will really have to consider our options. Cayman has been British by choice for a long, long time. And I still believe that there is a lot of merit and a lot of benefit in us retaining our British association, and that British citizenship in and of itself confers us certain rights which otherwise we would not have.
But the question is whether or not those benefits outweigh.
Well, you see, that's what happens is, over time you start to have to take stock and start to weigh these things up. But Cayman, in my view, just in case anyone, I don't think we are at this stage ready as a country, as a people, as a government for independence. Independence requires a whole new set of skills and abilities, which we are still developing. There are only a relatively few of us who have the international experience to be able to deal.
I'll come out of retirement.
We'll need you if that were to be the case. But what I'm saying is, I am not saying that we should never contemplate independence. I'm saying that if that is what we want, we must plan for it and we must be ready for it, because there are a whole range of countries who have stepped off the precipice before they were fully ready. And we can look around and see a number of what I will call failed states who just simply were not ready for that massive step. But we cannot, and while I am Premier, we will not simply lie down and let the UK believe that it can do whatever it wants for political expediency or whatever to us as a territory. We are the subject of a constitutional order. All of us are creatures of that constitution, and all of our positions, and all of us are subject to it, starting with the governor. The governor doesn't exist in vacuum. The office is a creature of the constitution, and the UK is as bound by that constitutional order as we are. If they want to change, they have to change it, but the order says what the order says, and we're going to hold them to it.
When will we need to get the Cayman public involved in this? When do we need to hear from them, other than hearing from them on the talk shows and people otherwise? Do you need, how much support do you need from the Caymanian people at this point in time to demonstrate to the United Kingdom that we're not only going to stand firm on this, but if there are hard decisions to be made, we're going to let the people of the Cayman Islands decide, have a say in those hard decisions?
Well, a government always wants all the support it can possibly get. All of the indications I have so far are very, very good. As I said, Governor Chowdhury, who's currently in the British Virgin Islands, rang me to express his disappointment and his support for the efforts the government will have to take, and will do whatever he can on that front. The leader of the opposition has called me to talk about how we plan a sustained campaign. And we're working with Cayman Finance on the financial services end. But more broadly, I think even people who have nothing directly to do with the financial services understand that it is just wrong in principle for people or members of the British Parliament, most of whom don't even really know where Cayman is, to stand up and decide on things which affect us so fundamentally, and that there must be something wrong with that.
And OC, if I can just add to what the Premier said, and then specifically as it relates to what we can do, and speaking specifically to industry now, is to continue to do as we've always done, and I think as we've done effectively, communicate to clients that the situation being what it is something that is seeking to be imposed if it gets to that stage in 2.5 years. So there's a lot that can happen between now and then. Global standards itself may move, or there may be depending on the outcome of the discussions, there are a number of potentialities. So this is not necessarily a done deal, and I think we need to make sure that we understand and appreciate that, and industry needs to continue to do what it always does, and it's give quality service, best in class, adhering to global standards, and making sure that your clients know the position that the government is taking with respect to ensuring that we are working to continue to support the industry and the country. And I think that message needs to resonate as is appropriate in the various communications with clients, etc. Also echo everything that the Premier said about generally the community showing that appreciation of what we're up against. And it is, and to quote Johan, this is no time to engage in what he's termed the tribal politics, because we, it's the classic colonial expression, divided, united we stand, divided we fall. And on this issue, we need to have a united front for the best interests of the country as a whole. And I think, I think it's important also to put in context in case there are some naysayers that may want to jump up and say, well, the government didn't do enough to try to prevent this outcome in the House yesterday. I think people need to understand, as I said, there has been a sustained campaign behind the scenes, primarily working and engaging with our counterparts in the United Kingdom, legislators, to get them information about what the reality is versus the myths that was successful at the House of Lords, as we talked about, in Lord Ahmed's delivery about the facts that really kind of dispelled a lot of the rhetoric.
And this eventually goes back to the House of Lords.
This goes back to the House of Lords. So again, it's, we'll wait and see what happens there. But I think as it relates to leading up to the House of Commons, what we expected to be a debate, the Premier actually wrote to every single member of the House of Commons, that's 690 plus, giving them a very detailed and factual but succinct letter that again outlines why supporting this amendment is not appropriate in the context of the Cayman Islands. We also, have been working with the ministry, working with the UK office in the form of our representative over there, Mr. Eric Bush, and providing him information in order to assist with his individual engagements and lobby on the ground, even before the letter was written to the MPs, to ensure that we try to do what we can to affect the outcome. But of course, as you say, all politics is local. And certainly the local politics in the United Kingdom, as we've kind of outlined here, led to what happened, yesterday. And we have to do what we have to do as a government to support the local population and the local politics here in the Cayman Islands.
Yep, and I just want to say to our listening and viewing audience as well that the Office of the Leader of the Opposition has issued a statement dated yesterday in relation to this as well, and we will discuss this more on Friday. I just want to give the Honourable Premier an opportunity for any final comments that he may want to make.
Thank you, Osi. I think it's been important that we had a chance to explain a little more fully the background, the context, and the challenges that we face over and above the statement that I issued yesterday and Minister Rivers' opportunity to speak for 3 or 4 minutes on Cayman 27 last night. This is a very serious matter and one that we're taking very seriously. But quite frankly, whether or not we are forced down the road of having public registered of beneficial ownership or not, I do believe that our financial services industry is resilient enough, the level of credibility that we have, that we will not only survive, but we will continue to thrive. As I said, the issue though, this particular issue highlights a fundamental problem, and about attitudes, about the UK's willingness to discriminate against overseas territories, about the attitude of members of Parliament who seem to believe that they can sit in Westminster and legislate for territories that are 4,000 miles away. We have to sort those things out, because our continued survival, let alone prosperity, depends on those sorts of things. We cannot go back to the old colonial days. We cannot accept modern colonialism. We've come too far. Personally, I devoted the best part of 9 years of the early years of my political career to helping to fight for the constitution that we have now. which has given us a tremendous amount of autonomy. OC, you've been around government for 100 years, and you were
more than that,
and you were cabinet secretary. You know how life worked before cabinet actually had the ability to make decisions itself.
Yes.
When you were simply advising the governor and hoping and praying that the governor would accept the advice of the cabinet. We can't go back to the days where a British governor makes the decisions for this territory. And even worse, we'd be taking it back even further, where people in the UK Parliament, who don't even know where Cayman is, can't find it on the map, can make decisions for us. We're not going back there. That's why I said we have retained two of the top constitutional lawyers in the UK to look at this situation, and depending on what their advice is, we are going to fight this with everything that we possibly can. We cannot allow the most prosperous territory of the British territories to lose our place because of British political differences and views.
Thank you very much for that, Premier. Thank you very much also, Minister Rivers, for being here, folks. I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension, for the record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be in an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers, our sisters, and our cousins' keepers. Just don't treat your cousins the way that the UK has treated the overseas territories' cousins differently from the Crown dependencies. I also urge you to donate to a worthy charity. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling, Dwayne Banks at 12 noon for Talk Today. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful, resilient, successful, prosperous Cayman Islands.